QuickBooks Pro Plus Desktop 2022 Manage Sales Tax Form. Get ready because we bookkeeping pros are moving up the hilltop with QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2022. Here we are in our QuickBooks sample file, Sample Rock Castle Construction. We're going to then open up the Open Windows by going to the View drop-down Open Windows list. That provides our open windows on the left-hand side. We don't have anything currently open. We're going to open up the home page by going to the Company drop-down Home page. There is the home page. Let's maximize it in that gray area, maximizing the home page, opening up the financial statements with the Reports drop-down. Looking at the major financial reports, company and financial, we want to go on down to that balance sheet report, the balance sheet standard report. I'll keep the dates as they are. There's the two items in the open windows. Let's go to the reports drop down again, company and financial. Open up that P&L, profit and loss, otherwise known as the income statement report. Changing the dates from January. Let's start the first one out here at January through then December. There's our three open items in the open windows. Let's go back to the home page. We're looking at the home section, concentrating in on the vendor section. So within the vendor section, we went through the standard payable process and then the inventory process. We're focusing now on the manage sales tax. This item is in the vendor section, although it's kind of different than the other normal process. You can see nothing is actually connected directly to it. That's because when we think about the sales tax, we're not talking about something that we actually basically purchased a good or a service. It is a tax that is accumulating up as we have sales, kind of a value added tax. Now note that it's not also not connected down here because this would be in the customer section. These two forms are basically the forms that are going to be used to construct the sales tax. In the United States, the sales tax is not a federal tax. It's going to be a state and local tax. So we'll go into a lot more detail on how to set up the sales tax in the second half of the course when we set up the new company file and we go through the process of setting up the sales tax and so on and so forth. Here, we want to just think about how the flow would work and how the sales tax would basically fit into it. So first of all, just a quick reference on setting up the sales tax. If you go to the Edit drop-down up top and then in the Preferences, you'll then find the tax item and the sales tax on down below. Here's the sales tax, and then in the company preferences, do you charge sales tax? You can add the sales tax. Once you have the sales tax that is in place, then you have to determine which of your inventory items are going to be taxable and set those up in the items list. We'll talk more about the items list later. So for example, if you sell inventory, you can assign those items as being taxable. Also, your customers then who you're selling to will generally be taxable by default if they're subject to sales tax because the thing you're selling is subject to sales tax. But you might have certain customers that are exempt from the sales tax, and therefore you'd also have to look at the customers in that case and adjust the appropriate sales tax setting there. We'll go into that in more detail in the future. Once set up, then when you create an invoice, that being the start of the sales process, or when you have a sales receipt, which would be the point of sale process on more of a cash basis method, you will then have the items that would be involved within them. Let's open a sales receipt very quickly. Even though we're in the sales cycle here, this is what's going to be increased in the sales tax. So you can see, for example, we sold this item, which was subject to the sales tax of the 7.65, that then resulting in the sales tax that's basically going up. Closing that then that's going to accumulate upwards until we pay the sales tax, and that's kind of like a payable that is happening here. So as the sales tax goes up, we're generating a payable that will be increasing, that we're then going to have to pay to the government at some point in the future. Notice it's different than you might see the sales tax, in other words, and think of it, just let's open up that sales one more time. This sales tax, you might think of it as saying, hey, look, we got revenue of $102.65, and then we're going to have a sales tax expense of the 7.65. That's not how we do it here. What we do instead is, and we'll talk more about this when we get to the invoice and sales receipt, but instead we're going to increase the $95 in sales, and then we're going to have the 7.65 not go to the income statement, but go directly to the balance sheet, increase in a liability, which will basically be like a payable account for the sales tax. So that's how it's going to work out. So we're not going to have like a sales tax expense item. And that then means that liability is increasing as we make the sales. And that's why it's up here in the vendor section, because we're going to have to track that liability and then pay it. So let's see it on the balance sheet. Let's go to the balance sheet on the left-hand side and see how that will work out. So when we make sales, we're going to have a liability account down here, which is going to be related to the sales tax. Here it is in our sales tax payable account. So if I was to double click on that sales tax payable, zooming into it with our zoom feature, it's being increased with the sales items, the invoices. And here I don't see any sales receipts. Looks like they basically do pretty much all invoices in this particular business. And then we have the sales tax payment that is being made, and that payment is being made with the widget. Note, as this goes up, you might then say, well, then I can pay it off at a later point in time, just like I would paying off the bills by having a check, writing a check, or having some kind of electronic transfer go into the state or the local government, which we're paying the sales tax to. And you can, but notice it's not showing up as basically just a check type of form, but instead as a sales tax payment, still representing a decrease to the checking account, but that sales tax payment meaning that we use kind of like the widget in order to pay down the sales tax. So that's how it's going to work. I'm going to close this back out. Knowing that, let's go back then to the Home tab on the left-hand side. Let's go then up top in the Vendor section, looking then at the Manage Sales Tax wizard over here. And so you got your sales tax preferences. We'll go into this in more detail in a future presentation. When we set up the sales tax, we got the sales tax liability. This, in essence, will give you that report for the sales tax liability. We can find this in the reports section as well. We'll take a look at that when we go into the reports in more detail. Sales tax revenue summary. So here's another report that we could see for the sales tax revenue summary report. And then we can view the sales tax items. So these are going to be the items that are subject to sales tax, or the sales tax items themselves. So we're paying sales tax then to City of East Bayshore, State Board of Equalization, and so on and so forth with regards to the sales tax. We'll set up those sales tax items in a future presentation. Open sales tax code list. So we're going to say the sales tax, these are things that are driving the functioning of the sales tax, either having sales tax or no sales tax. That will be useful when we set up the items that will then be used when we create the invoices, and then we can adjust the sales taxes that are going to be due as well. Now, when we use this widget to basically pay the sales tax by saying pay the sales tax, then we can determine the date range on which we need to pay the sales tax. And when we do so, I won't do it here at this point, it will in essence either generate a check or some decrease to the checking account typically. The other side then decrease in the sales tax payable. This will typically be done by what we're going to make the sales as time passes, generating sales taxes when we do so, and then we will accumulate the fact that we owe sales tax, and then possibly we will accumulate that upwards, say monthly or quarterly. And then we're going to have to pay it at some later time, meaning we're going to be paying it after the month that we had incurred it, or the quarter that we had incurred it, and be paying for the prior month. So for example, let's say we pay monthly. If first month had gone by, then we would have all the sales tax that had accumulated. We know about them because we made the sales and calculated the sales tax with the invoices and the sales receipts. And now we have this amount that is due for January, which we would pay, let's say, by the end of February. This widget then you would set to the end of January so that you could pay it by February. And this widget will, in essence, then make the payment, recording the payment into the system in a similar process as you might do if you were to pay the bill or simply write a check. But we're not going to use that pay bill or write a check system. We're going to use the sales widget manager, which will show up by when we go to the balance sheet. You'll then see, if we go back over to that sales tax payment, you'll see a nice little thing saying that you used the sales tax widget in order to do that by showing the decrease to the checking account with that sales tax payment item. And then the other side, of course, is going to come out of the checking account. So notice when we pay the sales tax, it's very similar to a system where we're going to be paying off like an accounts payable. The only difference being the accounts payable goes up with bills. Every time we enter a bill, the accounts payable goes up. The sales tax payable goes up whenever we enter a sales issue, which is kind of strange because of the way the sales tax works. We're going to have to create the liability as we create the sales items. So to understand this a little bit more fully, it's nice to go over the setup process, going back to the home tab to set up the items, the customers, and the preferences and so on. We'll do that in the second half of the course, and we will be setting up sales tax and items and customers that we'll be paying sales tax with.